You understand what was behind it? You understand, making sure that they keep prices on the global market consistent. And who went into it together? It was mother and daughter. You understand? Or daughter and mother, America and England. They both spearheaded. America spearheaded, but England already was on board. Remember Blair and Bush and all of that. Because this prophetic word, Zaytanina, Wainanima, Atagwida, Sila, Samau, and see thou hurt not the oil and the wine, I heard. You understand that? And now the oil and the wine are, in its original context, for man's pleasure, according to Psalm 104, verse 15. Take a note. They are always in short supply in general, even in so-called good times. It's not like there's a whole bunch, a whole surplus of it, so to speak, but they're always in short supply and become precious in a famine. So the wise amongst us, we already know what we have to see about. You know what I'm saying? Seeing that we recognize, remember the Yahweh says that he won't do anything unless he shows his servants, the prophets. He won't do anything unless he shows his people. He will warn his people first, and they can choose to hear, you understand, or to forbear, or to heed, or to be disobedient, gainsaying, you understand, or ignorant, but still he will show them. And as we're being shown this, and as we're seeking to show our family, our brethren, they are always in short supply and become precious in RAHAB, become precious in famine, like the situation in a microcosm, present Egypt. During the famine, oil and wine should be preserved and not harmed. In other words, in a time of famine, and this is interesting if you study like history, that when invaders came in, generally speaking, you understand, that things like oil and wine, you understand, were particularly valued. Now the Mohammedans, because the whole, we could say, misinterpretation that many have concerning alcohol, because alcohol is alcohol and wine is wine, but there's a lot of confusion there among, ignorant, fanatical folks, and there's a lot of them who are part of this whole Egypt thing too. This is why the American State Department in the West is very leery about this present situation. Remember what it says in prophecy, that news out the east, according to Daniel, shall frighten the beast, like news out the things that are coming out of the east shall frighten them, because this is not something they're really engineering. This is something that has happened, and other times it's happened, so they thought that, okay, Mubarak will suppress this, but among the crowd, it's not just the Islamists, it's students. So this is why Obama's response was kind of like so-called bilateral, in a sense. He didn't want to offend the students, but he didn't want to offend Mubarak either, the government, you know what I mean, which they back. You see what I'm saying? But on the ground, even the students are beginning to weigh against America, which they really don't want. They want to go along with the students because they went along with the students' Tunisia. So it becomes a very difficult terrain for them, because they say, yes, allow the protesters their rights. Then it's like saying, well, yes, there's Islamist influence among the protesters, and they fear that's going to be like the Iranian or the Paris, Mena Mena Tekul Ufarisin. It's going to be like Faris or Persia. It's going to be like Iran, the Iranian Revolution. So this is one of the reasons why Obama's kind of response and the American response is kind of like very middle of the roadish. You see what I'm saying? Very middle of the roadish, because they don't want to say they support Mubarak, because then the people on the ground, when they have a new Egypt, it will be very much against America. But already the feelings are not very, for the Egyptians in Egypt being hit by tear gas that says made in the USA, you know what I mean? Imagine if you were in that situation. You see what I'm saying? So, it's very tricky. It reminds me, and I'm just going to close on this, but it reminds me of what happened a couple of years ago in the Bush, where they was talking about the Palestinians should have free elections, let them have free election. Like, they talk this stuff. This is why Revelation says they have there's two horns. There's the feet of the beast that has clay and iron. There's this duplicity. that's involved in it. We may say hypocrisy, gabizanet, but there's a duplicity that they said the Palestinians should have free elections because they thought that, well, everybody would vote and it would be more American and more Western because, after all, America and the West symbolize democracy. So they had elections, and the people they installed a Hamas government, and then immediately they went against the people's decision, which was so-called democratic. It was proven, even the inspector said, hey, it was a very democratic election, and the majority of the people said they wanted a Hamas government. But Hamas is the enemy of the modern state of Israel, and Hamas is labeled as a terrorist. And the people are saying, well, we want the so-called terrorist enemies of Israel to be our legally, freely, democratically elected government. So the Americans, Bush and them, you know how they go, they just said, we're against you. Now, Obama, being on the other side of the pole, not the Republican horn, but the Democratic horn, he's trying to be very Clinton-esque. He's trying to be very, be a moderator and say everybody should have, freedom and be able to speak. But then when you speak, don't use hard words, because see what happened over here. No, he didn't say all that, but, it's like one of those kind of little baby speeches, and the people are saying, listen, come on. He's not saying, we don't understand what he's saying. Do you support us? Do you support Mubarak? I mean, where do you stand? You stood with the Tunisians. You see what I'm saying? The student protesters, and you talked all about him in your State of the Union speech and everything. But what about us now? Mubarak was like an evil pharaoh to us. He's a Rahab. You know what I'm saying? So it's very interesting how this will all pan out in the hours, in the days, and the weeks and the months following. And whether our trifecta that connects with Revelation chapter 6, verse 5 and 6, the third seal, Rahab, the famine, Psalm 87, and verse 4, the Torah studies that we're doing from Exodus, coming out of Egypt, the evil Pharaoh, the Apophis, the dragon, the Nile, the water situation, Ethiopia, the threats by Mubarak against Ethiopia because of the Nile waters, and the prophetic says to Pharaoh that Rahab, you think like you made the Nile River for yourself. That's the very attitude of the evil Pharaoh, who Mubarak now seems to be beyond any shadow of a doubt, especially among those Egyptians, present-day Greco-Roman, so-called Arab Egyptians, who are trying to get a new government, a new Egyptian order. It's very interesting. Stay tuned, y'all willing. More to come, and watch and pray always.
The truth has overcome the lies, the good news of His Majesty in His Christ. And it is vital that we raise our tribal flag.